Welcome to the Move Smart Podcast. I'm Justin Goodhart, and I'm super excited to have you with us here today. Our goal here is really to bring in thought leaders to give you world-class tips in movement, mobility, strength training, gymnastics, parkour, martial arts, nutrition, wellness, meditation, stress management, supplementation, handstands, and more. We want to teach you how to build a movement practice, maximize strength gains, improve recovery, customize your nutrition, and ultimately develop movement intelligence. Our motto here is be healthy to be strong. Be strong to be useful, and live long to maximize that usefulness. Because the longer and stronger you're able to pursue your higher purpose, the better every single person on the planet will become. In this particular episode, I want to talk about a couple different things, and I'm going to do my best to weave them all together. We're going to talk about the Dallas bed rest study, which is super interesting. Like 6 athletes went on complete bed rest for like 3 weeks, and it was crazy. This was done in like the 1960s, and there's been a number of follow-up studies. And then I want to talk about the SAID principle, which is short for specific adaptation to impose demands, and how you can harness that principle for your warm-up and recovery. Then we're going to talk about how force is the language of cells, and really dig into that, talk about what it means. Then we're going to talk about how there's no circulation in your body without contraction and movement. So no blood circulates, no lymph fluid, no synovial fluid, nothing moves in your body without muscular contraction, okay? So muscles are the great catalyst for all circulation in the body. So we're going to tie that into the SAID principle. And then I think we're just gonna wrap it up from there. So let's go ahead, dig right in. So the Dallas bed rest study. This is really, it's crazy. Like I said, in the spring of 1966, 6 college students were looking for a job, and they found this lab that wanted to do some research on them. So it was like a summer-long study, and they do like a full eval of their cardio function, their lung function, blood work, all that stuff. So yeah, they measured them, they took their body fat, they took their weight, they did a bunch of treadmill tests to see their aerobic capacity, and then they put them on this 3-week period of complete bed rest. Literally, they went to the bathroom in a wheelchair. I don't even think they stood up at all. And then following that, they did an 8-week training period of mostly running. So after that full weeks, honestly, I don't know how they went through that. That's insane. But after those 8 weeks, they put them back to work. They immediately, it was basically like they wheeled them from the wheelchair straight in for their treadmill test, for their analysis. They ran daily. They tracked all these markers of wellness and performance, and then they put them on this program. And yeah, it was astounding. Their hearts had completely deconditioned. Their heart volumes, cardiac output, and oxygen uptake really just took a nosedive. They were slower. They were weaker. Their peripheral circulation really decreased a lot as well. And even 2 of them fainted directly afterward in the treadmill test that they took right after the bed rest. And then there's been a number of follow-up studies as well. I think the summary of this was that they basically lost a year's worth of progress. Like those 3 weeks in bed set them back a year in their training program. I think they basically lost like 25% of their physical capacities, like their speed, their endurance, everything was decreased. Basically, 3 weeks of complete perpetual bed rest had a more negative effect or equal negative effect on cardiovascular conditioning as did 40 years of aging, which is just crazy. The thing is, we almost do miniature versions of this to ourselves, even if that's lounging around for the weekend or not moving, not training. Maybe you've had a busy week at work and you haven't been able to train much. These effects just demolish our strength, our conditioning. They age us. They quite literally age us. Movement is the closest thing to the fountain of youth that we'll ever have. Movement keeps you young. It makes you young. And rest, excessive rest, ages you immensely. So really astounding stuff. Thanks to my friend Steph Mays, who alerted me to this research, which I found very, very interesting. Basically, the moral I want you to take from that is that movement is healing. It's necessary. It's fundamentally human. Now, this is an extreme example, right? Like these guys were in bed for 8 weeks. I don't think, unless you've had a major illness in your life, like you probably can't really fathom what that was like. But these guys totally did, and it's crazy. So basically, I'm saying all that to say this. Don't over-rest. Over-resting is often a much greater problem than overtraining. Yeah, if you're injured, there's a fine line you have to walk between recovery and movement. But if you rest too much, you're going to pay a price. And if you push it too hard, you'll also pay a price. But I think most of us fall so far on the side of excessive rest. Again, your body needs stimulus to heal. It needs stimulus to adapt itself. And so that sort of dovetails into my next point, which is force is the language of cells. Credit to Dr. Andreo Spina for that. He's doing some really interesting and great work. Check him out on Facebook or YouTube if you can. Force is the language of cells. It's what they respond to. Or another way of putting that is a cell is a machine for turning experience into biology. So look this up on Wikipedia. It's called mechanotransduction, and it's basically how your body converts mechanical or physical forces into basically neural signals, hormonal signals, electrical signals, okay? And that's powerful. So again, when you rob your body of those signals, when you basically give your body the silent treatment, like it suffers. It suffers a lot. Don't give your body silent treatment. Cells need force. It's the language they speak. Don't give your body silent treatment. I might talk a little bit more about that later. I mentioned earlier how I wanted to talk about the SAID principle. Again, that stands for specific adaptation to impose demands. The trouble with this principle is that it's so broad that people have a hard time really applying it practically to their training. And I remember learning about the SAID principle, actually my first ever personal training course, which I think I finished like my senior year of high school. I went through that. And I remember it talked about the SAID principle and it seemed interesting, but they just covered it really briefly and then didn't really hear about it again. But basically, the intelligent way to sort of approach the SAID principle is start with the basics, start with the simple exercises, then move to more advanced and complex exercises. Start with slower movements, and as you progress, move toward faster movements. Start with low force and progress to high force. Start with shorter distance and increase to longer distance. Start with bilateral movements and then move to unilateral movements and gradually use the overload principle. But I want to talk about the SAID principle in context of warming up and cooling down. So I want to modify it a little bit. I want to say that your body doesn't just have specific adaptation to impose demands. I'm going to take it a little bit further and say that your body has specific preparation to impose demands. So specific preparation to specific demands. So what does this mean? I do recommend sort of a full body warm up to get the heart rate up, to get the body temperature up. And this almost seems intuitive, but if you're going to do heavy squats that day, your warm-up needs to be squats and your cool-down needs to be squats. If you're going to be doing heavy weighted chin-ups that day, your warm-up needs to include chin-ups and your cool-down needs to include chin-ups. Now, that almost seems intuitive, but you're stressing these specific pathways in very specific ways. If you modified your grip or your stance or anything, you'd modify the muscle recruitment pattern and the movement pattern, right? So you are placing very specific demands. So really applying this principle, you're going to get the best chance at adaptation when you specifically warm up and specifically cool down. Your body has no interest in adapting to a stress that you've never placed on it. It doesn't care at all. It will not adapt to a stress that you have not placed on it. That's the whole training effect, is placing stress on your body, using progressive overload to increase that stress as your body's capacity to handle that stress increases, and that's how you get stronger. But applying this to warm up and the cool down, when you prep the nervous system, the muscles, the bones, the tendons, the ligaments, specifically for the activity you're going to do, not only will you probably lower your likelihood of injury, but then if you do that again as a cool down, it really just serves to increase circulation, to flush out all the metabolic waste you've created from those muscular contractions, get rid of the lactic acid and all the other byproducts of exercise, and really just ushers you basically out of the stress created by your training into the rest and digest mode. So if I'm going to do a set of 3RM back squat in my workout today, I'll start real light, maybe like 30 to 40%, go 50%, 60%, 70% of my load that I'm going to use for the day, and then start, then that's like getting into my work sets. As far as a cool down, I prefer, and I've been having good success with, a much lower percentage. So I cool down with like very high rep, very, very easy. It's basically just to create that exact same muscular contraction that I did in my workout. Now, think about this from one extreme. Let's say you didn't do a warm-up and you didn't do a cool down. Let's say you just walked into the gym, threw on as much weight as you possibly could handle, and just went for a 1 rep max back squat and then walked out. That was it, right? Or maybe just did a sub-maximal burnout, just maximum repetition. So maybe you did like 225 pounds, no warm-up, no cool down. You just threw that on the bar, did as many reps as you possibly could, and then walked out of the gym, right? That's one extreme. What do you think the result of that would be? I'm willing to guess that you would be extremely sore the next day, more than likely, even if you were accustomed to using that rep range and that weight for squats. My guess is you'd probably be quite sore, and you probably would have been able to do more reps if you warmed up properly. So play with this. I don't have research studies to support this, that by applying the said principle to warm up and cool down, athletes reduce delayed onset muscle soreness and increase performance by 10%. I don't know if that study's out there. I don't have research like that, but I'm saying that there's some powerful principles at work here, and it's worth tinkering with in your own training, in your own workout programs. I mean, just as there is specific adaptation to impose demands, there's specific preparation to impose demands, and I think there's a specific cool down for imposed demands. Conversely, there's specific de-adaptation to lack of demand. So that's something to think about. All right, and then like I mentioned before, I want to talk a little bit about circulation, that there is no circulation without movement and without muscular contraction, okay? And this is true at a very fundamental level. Like, if your heart doesn't beat, there's no blood circulation. If your muscles don't contract, specifically the muscles of your legs, like those are critical in body-wide blood circulation. If the smooth muscles of your stomach and intestines and even your blood vessels don't contract, there's no circulation. And this is also true of skeletal muscles. Like, they aid in circulation. If you always, like, let's say you wore a straitjacket in your upper body, but you had just the most mobile, agile, strong legs of anyone, your legs would probably be extremely healthy. You'd have great circulation, your recovery would be great, but then you'd probably find that if you tried to go do some push-ups or whatever, you'd be all bound up. Lack of movement is death, basically. Death. There's no circulation without contraction, without movement. But then the rate of circulation determines the rate of adaptation and recovery. So let's think about this for a second. Muscles can adapt and recover much quicker than tendons, ligaments, bones, other connective tissue. Why is that? They have a much higher metabolic rate, much higher circulation level, much higher oxygen supply, a much higher cell turnover. What this means is if there is a localized portion of your body that's all bound up, if you have incredibly tight upper back or incredibly tight hamstrings, that may be influencing your blood circulation and may be influencing your recovery. Or rather, your recovery may be suboptimal if there's lack of circulation. So, that's it. I hope you've taken away something useful from this episode. I'll post some links in the comments to the Dallas bed rest study so you can read a little bit more about the SAID principle, so you can learn maybe about the different metabolic rates of different body tissues. And then finally to Dr. Andrea Spina's stuff about force being the language of cells. As usual, I'd love to hear any and all questions you have. It'd be a huge favor to me if you could post a review in iTunes, or just, send me an email at justin@wellroundedathlete.net. I'd love to hear any constructive criticism, any questions you have, any feedback you have, any guests you'd like to have on the show. Really, I'm doing this because I want to bring together really just world-class nutritionists, gymnasts, chiropractors, parkour practitioners, circus performers. Really, nothing is off limits. I just want to help you guys out. I want to help you be free in your body. I want to help you be strong in your body. And I want you to be able to learn from world-class people. Thanks for listening today. Hope you found something useful. You can find me online at wellroundedathlete.net or on Facebook at facebook.com/wellroundedathlete. I'm also on Twitter at WRAthlete and Instagram, WRAthlete. Thanks again.